Morning, everyone. What an amazingly sweet thing to get to do. To just sit down on the earth and breathe and be breathed. I was appreciating once again what an amazing tradition this is. Doesn't ask you to believe in anything, it just asks you to sit down, to be here. And we're told that no matter what we say or cognize or figure out, insight, I got it, I got it. The minute we try to put it into words, it's the finger pointing at the moon, because words can't express it. And we have to say something. And we express it through our body, speech, and mind. We live it, it's alive. And we've been studying this past January, move into February, some with it too, the Buddha's teachings on social and communal harmony. The story is that when Buddha was awakened under the Bodhi tree, his first impulse was, I can't say anything, because anything I say will make it small. And who knows if he said this, but the feeling of you can't get this. They can't get it. You have to sit down under the Bodhi tree with deep intention to wake up with and for all beings. And all the gods and goddesses came forward and said, hey, wait a minute, Buddha. I thought your vow was to try to help. So he thought about it and thought about it. And in the end, he did say something. And he continues to say something to this day. And the teachings that came through the Buddha are our root teachings. But he was also the Buddha before Buddha, and there were Buddhas before him and Buddhas after him. And they're us waking up to be Buddha. Deep intention, deep Dharma heart. So what I wanted to do today and continue to do is I've been having fun. I hope maybe you have been having a little fun too. Remember Norman Fisher saying early on, if this isn't fun, don't do it. I mean, it's not fun all the time. Obviously, life isn't fun all the time. But this isn't a chore. This becomes more and more just joyful expression of what is it to be alive? And how do we live it and become it deeply? So I want to share a little bit of what the Buddha had to say. And then I want to explore and share some teachings from other teachers, because I think it's so easy to project it onto one person. And you know what? It's the whole world. The whole world is singing the Dharma. And each one of you and each one of us, that's our job, to learn to express it through our own particular lifetime. So I want to share how different teachers, people who have dedicated their lives, just like the Buddha, to this path, there are some expressions. But let me start with the Dalai Lama, who says, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni lived, attained enlightenment, and taught in India more than 2,500 years ago. However, I believe that much of what he taught so long ago can be relevant to people's lives today. The Buddha saw that people can live together freely as individuals, equal in principle, and therefore responsible for each other. He saw that the very purpose of life is to be happy. He talked about suffering in the context of ways to overcome it. He recognized that while ignorance binds beings in endless frustration and suffering, the development of understanding is liberating. The Buddha saw that every member of the human family, man and woman, all genders alike, has an equal right to liberty, not just in terms of political or even spiritual freedom, but at a fundamental level of freedom from fear and want. He recognized that each of us is just a human being like everyone else. Not only do we desire happiness and seek to avoid suffering, but each of us has an equal right to pursue these goals. I would like to, not just as an aside, but as I saw the movie Origin last night, which is based on Isabel Allende's book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discomfort. It's an amazing movie, directed by Ava DuVernay. I can't recommend it enough. Please go see it. It sings of the Dharma, uncomfortable Dharma. So here, I'll go on just a little bit. Hosen Allen Sanaki. Hosen has, like Bhikkhu Bodhi, walked the path of what is social engagement and Buddhism for his entire life. He now, many of you know this, went in for a routine procedure and hasn't so far, or just in moments, coming out of what looks like a deep coma. We just don't know. This is what he says. He's quoting Dr. Ambedkar, who works with the Dalit communities in India, which is where Alan has also gone and practiced. The Dalit are part of the origin story movie, traditionally called Untouchables. The story is that one of the things she tells us that when Martin Luther King went to India, he was introduced as an untouchable. And that he said at first he was shocked and appalled that someone would call him that. And then he realized that in this culture, he is an untouchable, that he early on understood non-separation, that each person's path is the path of waking up together. This is what Dr. Ambedkar says, as quoted by Alan Sanaki. The Buddha told Ananda that his religion was based on reason and experience, and that his followers should not accept his teachings as correct and binding merely because they emanated from him. Being based on reason and experience, they were free to modify or even to abandon any of his teachings if it was found that at any given time and in any given circumstance, they do not apply. He wanted that it should remain evergreen and serviceable at all times. No other religious teacher has shown such courage. Don't put another head on top of your own. Stay with your own experience, deep, follow it all the way through. Zazen, it's alive. Alan goes on and says, in a practical sense, developing our intention to connect is the key. Developing our intention to connect is the key. Keep paying attention there. I want to connect. I want to be a loving person. I know I'm a loving person. And oh my goodness, look at that thought that just arose. Woohoo! Pay attention. Keep breathing, waking up, compassion, kindness. The intention to connect is done through training and practice in these teachings. Again and again, the Buddha speaks to the challenge and necessity of practice, continuous practice. Not because you're not trying hard, not because you're not a good person, not because you didn't figure it out or your intention isn't deep enough, just continuous practice forever. Alan says, through our diligent effort, may we learn to find harmony even in times of conflict. As we grow in wisdom, may we reflect that our, quote, land was tranquil and not beset by thieves, and the people with joy in their hearts, playing with their children, dwelt in open houses. May you, with joy in your hearts, playing with the children of the earth, always remembering the children of the earth, dwell in open houses, open hearts, open eyes. So here's something I found by Stephen Batchelor, who's a beautiful teacher and very much focused on secular Buddhism. It's called Being Completely Human. In practice, I find that in meeting a specific situation of life, very often it's one for which there are no ready-made solutions. There's no one-size-fits-all practice that I can impose on that situation. I need to draw from the resource I've accumulated over the years. I sometimes feel that the more different practices, the different philosophies, the different moral doctrines, and so on, I like to think of them as different tools that I keep in my toolbox. I feel that what I'd say the finger pointing to the moon is that there is an extraordinary range and richness and comprehensiveness of approaches that we can draw upon to suit the peculiarities of the crisis or the struggle or the question or the moral solution that we are seeking to address. We might all be noticing that there might be a few crises or struggles or moral ethical questions happening. In the many ways, the skill of practicing the Dharma is to be able to discern with intelligence that is born from experience, that's often born from an endless process of trial and error, of having made mistakes, of having learned from our mistakes, of being able to draw from this wealth of experience, and so on, the discernment to recognize what is appropriate for this situation. This is why we sit, to be fully alive, fully responsive, fully receptive, fall down and get up forever. Then he quotes Yunman, one of his favorite Zen teachers, Umman, lived in the first half of the 10th century in South China, and once a monk came to him and said, "What is the highest and most profound teaching of all the Buddhas and the ancestors?" And Umman said, "An appropriate response." What is it? I think, Stephen Batchelor thinks, that what this is pointing to is the need for discernment, the need for prajna. Wisdom is, in fact, an appropriate translation in certain contexts, but it loses, I think, what the Buddha and certainly the early intuitive, the early scholarly schools, they understood very much more as a process of intelligent discrimination or discernment. It's the ability to differentiate, to sit in the middle of oneness, the isness of what is, and to differentiate. He says, with practice, it arises as an intuitive response with spontaneity. And I would say, because we'll chant it later when we do the service, is homage to the perfection of wisdom. She is an organ of vision. What is that? What is this prajna that is an organ of vision? The entire body is hands and eyes. The entire body is Buddha's body. The entire universe, everything is singing the Dharma. What is the appropriate response? Okay, so here's a few responses that I picked out of an ocean and sea of teachings and teachers. I wanted to start with, there's a new book that's a compilation of Sojun Mel Weissman's teachings. It's in our lineage. Seeing One Thing Through, the Zen Life and Teachings of Sojun Mel Weissman. I'm going to read from the last chapter. What comes to mind when I reflect on the past 50 years of practice at the Berkeley Zen Center, the past 50 years, is deep gratitude. First and foremost for my late teacher, Shinryo Suzuki Roshi. His gentle but firm and nourishing example encouraged us, his disciples, to go beyond what we thought were our limitations. He once said to us, "I have nothing to offer you but my Zen spirit." He always taught by example. He had thoroughly digested the essence of Dogen's teachings and could express it in his own authentic way to make it accessible to our generation. He was totally grounded in the way. And what he taught was selflessness, not acting from our ego. Integrity, truthfulness, no arrogance, shikantaza, just doing, meeting each person right where they are with full attention. The world stops here before going on. Continuing to live our lives one moment at a time. He taught us the nature of determination and steadfastness. Sit still and don't give up. And the nature of compassion. If you need to change your posture, you can do so without judgment. When we can accept ourselves just as we are, both good and bad, it makes it possible to identify with others and to support them. One time, I told Suzuki Roshi how bad I was. And he said, "That was good. Otherwise, it would be harder to know how to help others." His intention was not to turn us into Japanese people, but to offer what he felt was the highest virtue of his culture. He didn't have to tell us what it was. We could practice and find out for ourselves. He'd be so happy. I used to greet each person at the door and say, "Good morning, Bodhisattvas. Good morning, Bodhisattvas." Deep faith and love. Seeing the Buddha, the goodness as each person in each person. Okay, I'm just going to go on till I run out of time because I found so many wonderful things to share. Okay, Blanche Hartman, first abbess of San Francisco Zen Center. I knew Blanche. I knew Blanche when Blanche was Blanche. What I notice is that with teachers over time, people start telling, I think this is how these stories happen. As somebody told me about Steve Stuckey the other day that turned him, I mean, Steve was an amazing Buddha Bodhisattva who was also an abbot. But I knew Steve when he was just Steve. I knew Blanche when she was just Blanche. You know, it's like we're all just human beings waking up. We can't miss that part of it. Everybody's delightfully, peculiarly, frustratingly, wonderfully human, just like you and just like me, waking up together. That's how we encourage each other. So I found this one. I've always liked this story by Blanche. Blanche was also very dedicated to social action as an expression of Buddhism. It's called The Most Transformative Moment. During the Vietnam War, I was a political activist and I fought for peace. There was some contradiction. There wasn't any peace in me. I hated the people who disagreed with me. That was a kind of war within me. In 1968, I was just beginning to look at the way in which I was vigorously clinging to my opinions about things. I'm sure none of us have anything to do in terms of insight in this. I was vigorously clinging to my opinions about things and denigrating others who had different opinions. Study the self. When there was a strike at San Francisco State University, the police came with their masks and clubs and started poking people. And without thinking, I ducked under the hands of people to get between the police and the students. I met this riot squad policeman face to face with his mask on and everything. He was close enough to touch. I met this policeman's eyes straight on, and I had this overwhelming experience of identification, of shared identity. This was the most transformative moment of my life. Having this experience of shared identity with the riot squad policeman. It was a gift. Nothing had prepared me for it. I didn't have any conceptual basis for understanding it. The total experience was real and incontrovertible. My life as a political activist ended with that encounter because there was no longer anything to fight against. The way I described it to my friends was, the policeman, excuse me, was trying to protect what he thought was right and good from all the other people who were trying to destroy it. And I was doing the same thing. I had no basis for understanding the experience of shared identity with someone whom I had considered completely other. That is the riot squad policeman. And because the experience had been so real and so powerful, I began to search for someone who would understand it. How could a riot squad policeman and I be identical? In my search, I met Suzuki Roshi. The way he looked at me, I knew he understood. That's how I came to be an ordained monastic. So some of you know that I have worked with returning Iraq, Afghanistan veterans. And I don't think I ever told them this, but one of my impulses was because I didn't like them. It's like, how could you go and do that? And then you look in each other's eyes and you understand each person is just trying to express as best they can in that moment. And what do we do next? How do we, in this current divided culture, so much charge with this and that, how are we going to live this? And how are we going to help each other, which is helping the whole world? Hey, here's from Norman Fisher. When you greet me, I bow. Notes and reflections from a life in Zen. This one's about contemplating climate change. Ah! I'm not laughing. I mean, I'm laughing, but I'm not laughing. There's an old Zen saying, the world is topsy-turvy. In other words, it's an upside down, crazy world. You're not crazy if that's what you see. We sit down in the middle of it. That's why we have days like today. Norman goes on to say, this may seem like an extreme statement, but only for a minute. If craziness means that we keep doing dysfunctional and destructive things, even when ensuing disasters are apparent, then it does seem that the world is crazy. What's the alternative to this denial, this continuing to keep trying to do the same old thing with the same results? Is there a way we can digest, hold, and live with the scale of our current problems? The Buddha? Oh, there's the Buddha. Notice that it is nearly impossible to take in all the suffering of the world, and yet there was no avoiding it. So he began his path with the insight that, quote, all conditioned existence has the nature of suffering. The path to peace doesn't come from avoiding suffering. He taught it comes from facing and going through rather than around it. You can't find peace in a troubled world without denying its trouble. Meditation practice, here we are, makes denial impossible and truth sustainable. If you sit down and sometimes you feel uncomfortable, sometimes there's moments of just ease and release and joy and just the whole world is open and breath is amazing. And sometimes it's just uncomfortable. Your body hurts and there's all these thoughts and there's all these ideas of other things that you could be doing today and that you're hungry or that whatever it is that's going through. And I'm going to sit here on this cushion until the bell rings with all of it. You may have noticed the first period was a little longer than usual. Our body is really conditioned because we do 30-minute periods. We used to do at Zen Center, and some places still do 40-minute periods. It's really different. Not better or worse, just different. When I was at San Francisco Zen Center, Richard Baker used to walk out of the room. He was the abbot at the time, and he just wouldn't come back for long periods of time. You'd sit and you'd sit and you'd sit. And if you think it wasn't uncomfortable, people say Suzuki Roshi was very absent-minded, and he sometimes would wander out of the room and forget to come back. If you think, sorry, confession, violent feelings don't come up about who is the doan and why are they not ringing the bell? And did they fall asleep? And what's the matter? I mean, it's just watch your mind. It's just amazing. How do you take care of yourself in a world where you have no idea what's going to happen next? That's what we're training for. Strong, upright presence, yes, I will, and infinite compassion. What's the appropriate response in this moment? No one can tell you. It is impossible to sit on a meditation cushion for any length of time without noticing suffering within and without. But as consciousness opens up little by little during the course of a practice life, it becomes big enough and resilient enough to see and withstand great difficulty. Through meditation practice, though meditation practice may or may not help us produce rational solutions to seemingly objective problems, it does give us wide vision and deep stability in the face of difficult situations, and the courage to sustain the effort to do something about them, even against great odds. In trying times, these personal qualities may be just as important as the rational solutions, and maybe even more important. Okay, and one last one. The Way of Tenderness by Zenju Earthling Manuel. Beautiful little book. Who is one of Blanche Hartman's Dharma heirs. So she's a Dharma sister. Awakening through race, sexuality, and gender. The Way of Tenderness. She says, she sounds like Blanche's heir. There tends to be a stream that happens. I remember Norman Fisher saying, is that what different teachers do, and maybe different lineages, like Suzuki Roshi's lineage, does have a particular flavor. Not better or worse than another lineage. It's just, you just find where you land that feels congruent or congruent enough with your own heart and way. Norman would say that each teacher in the wide, infinite expanse of Buddha's teachings of being alive, you just find one gateway that arises out of, I would say, the karma and conditioning of your life. You know, what comes through me comes through the conditioning of being born as Chris at a particular time and as a white person and as a, and I can't help it. Just like you can't help the teachings arising through each one of you and the particularity of the karma of your life. That's what's so beautiful. Because as it arises through each person, it will help other people who have similar or have had similar gateways. And then you wake up and help each other together. So I stumbled into Suzuki Roshi's teachings. Literally, I feel like I stumbled. I continue to feel like I stumbled, or the world stumbled me. Who knows how we end up here? And then I stumbled into San Francisco Zen Center, and then I stumbled into Everyday Zen, and then I stumbled into Dharma Heart Zen, and some of you stumbled in, and we'll just keep helping each other find our way. What are these amazing and beautiful teachings, and how do they land in the experience of your own life and heart? Don't put another head on top of your own. What is it? What is it? Zenju says, because her experience is that she was born in a Black skin, African American, was born as a queer person. Please, you don't even have to use whatever you were given. You have no choice. In meditation, the wisdom deep in my bones tells me that I do not have to fight against someone or something to gain my life. I have already been given a fully liberated life. In stillness, I glimpse the freedom that is already there. With each glimpse, I touch the earth. I grow more deeply rooted in the source from which the wisdom of spiritual teachings has always emerged. And then, amazingly, in a time when there's so much anger, she talks about the way of tenderness. The way of tenderness appears on its own. It comes when the events of your life have rendered you silent, have sat you in the corner, and there is nothing left to do but sit until the mental distress or confusion about who you are or who you are not passes. The way of tenderness may present itself as rage, so palpable that you are dizzy with it. It may come as a lion's roar. The way of tenderness comes even when failing to fight for our lives is what we fear the most. Complete tenderness arrives even if we have no desire to sink beneath the appearance of things, including our own identities and aspirations. I think she just said, when it arises in your mind, get me out of here. This is too hard. I don't understand. I don't know what to do. The world isn't fair. I can't believe what that person just said or did. I can't believe how much my heart hurts. I can't believe what I've been given in this lifetime. The title of Mel's book is Seeing One Thing Through. Suzuki Roshi said that to him. You just keep coming back forever. If you can think of something better to do, please go do it. The mystery is when you just keep coming back and you have absolutely no idea why. But something in your heart says yes. The way of tenderness is an experiential, non-intellectual, heartfelt acknowledgement of all embodied differences, including the one that you got. Prone, like everybody else, is to sickness, aging, and death. Sorry. It is a flexibility of perception rather than a settling into belief. It brings affirmation of life rather than of suffering center stage. It is an acknowledgement of the unfolding experience of life that is effortlessly ever present in all living beings. And yet, it does not deny the uniqueness or similarities of our embodiment. It simply arises along the path of life if we allow it. And then I thought, she brings forward the Sando Kai. We're not going to chant that today. Or maybe, I was thinking maybe I could get it and chant it. It's an amazing, it's the Sando Kai is the root teaching of our tradition. By Zen master Seikido Kisen. about the oneness and multiplicity of things coexisting. He writes, trunk and branches share the essence, revered in common, each has its speech. And Zenju says, the one trunk shares the essence of being a tree, yet the tree has its oneness and relationship with multiple roots, and the branches are multiple while having a relationship with the one trunk. The one trunk shares the essence of being a tree, yet the trunk has its oneness and relationship with multiple roots, and the branches are multiple while having a relationship with the one trunk. Each has its own speech, points to its multiplicity in the oneness. When we have an idea of harmony without an understanding that difference exists within oneness, we end up creating separation between people. Alternately, multiplicity may be mistaken for perceiving individual things one at a time, for perceiving each thing as separate, for being excluded from oneness. When we see things strictly through the lens of separation, we may think that we can hate someone without hating ourselves. From the point of view of oneness, it is impossible to truly love while hating someone else. What's separation? Perceiving through duality, which is what we do. We have two eyes. That's how we see. It's not a problem you're going to get over. Is we create thingness. We treat ourselves as a thing. We treat someone else as a thing. We treat the earth as a thing. It's out there. Zazen. Zazen body. It's alive. You can't figure it out. You can have insights. Oh, the whole world's interconnected, inter-be. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. And then the next moment will arise, and what's the appropriate response? And you get to watch the whole play of the one who completely knows the oneness. Devote your life to it. And the next thought that creates somethingness of yourself against yourself or against something or pushing against time. It's just a dance of great love and forgiveness and kindness and perseverance and strength and fierceness. And all you do is just sit down, come back, come home. And we'll keep helping each other. Because you're going to get lost. That's part of it. And so am I. That's part of it. And the whole world and whatever we're given, it's like, oh, thank you, Buddha. I really didn't want this one, but here we are. We'll keep helping each other. That's what taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is. And so we're about to move into Kinhin, another period of Zazen and service. Dogen says, study the self. The more you study the self, you will know it. Oh, I think I have a self. It's really lovely, and it has lots of opinions and seems to be prone to sickness, aging, and death. all of it, the whole shebang. The more we're aware of it instead of fighting against it, becomes intimate and close. The whole world comes forward to enlighten us. We're not in time, time isn't in us. It's just an incredibly intimate dance of alive. So thank you for letting me splash and play in all these different teachings. I hope one or two things have sort of like, maybe they'll stay with you. And there's nothing to do, really. Chelsea's going to ring the bell. We're going to stand up. You're maybe going to go to the bathroom or walk outside for 10 minutes, or then the bell's going to ring and you're going to sit down, and it's all going to be here. Moments of, you're lucky, a moment of contentment and openness and spaciousness and gratitude, probably salt and peppered with a few moments or thoughts of ay, 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 or whatever it is. We just keep going forever. That's amazing that we have this steep path of love. Okay. Beings of